Hello, this is Mr. McLeod, and this is the third video on creating a subclass of DrawingTool. In the previous videos, we set up the subclass system so that we set up the drawing tools, my drawing tool, so that it would extend DrawingTool, and we covered how to do the basics of overriding a method and adding new methods. But what we haven't done so far is the keyboard input, right? So we did mouse, in the second video, we did mouse listeners and motion listeners. But this third video is on how to do keyboard input. And I think for this one, I'm gonna also add another thing, which is that one thing we didn't cover when we first extended the drawing tool was we didn't really talk about how to add adding instance variables, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and add an instance variable because I think it would be cool if we combined, like we had the mouse listener like drawing a shape whenever we clicked, and then the mouse motion listener would draw a shape whenever we dragged. But I think it would be cool if we could set the shape that was drawn. So let's go ahead and just make a private instance variable. You should always make them private by default, so that it's enforcing encapsulation, so that you protect your data, right? So the class can't be broken. All right, I'm not going to get into that too much. All right, so we're going to say private. I'm going to just make this, keep it simple. We'll just make this a string. And the string is going to represent like which shape should I draw. So it's just going to be a description of the shape. There's lots of different ways we could do this, but I'm going to keep it simple here. So I'm going to say drawing shape. Okay, and let's say, up here we could make some public static final variables that will be helpful in giving people an idea of like what kind of shapes it can draw. So rather than them having to like guess which strings to pass to this method, it's a lot better if you have like constants, because then that can be in the API, right? So I'm going to say public static final string circle is a string that says circle. Okay, and then public static final string square is a string that says square. Oops. Okay, and then I think that's good enough for now. Technically, I mean, you could have like a shape that's like way more complex, that's like made up of a whole drawing, right? And from with using this system, you could come up with whatever constants you wanted up here to represent like which kinds of shapes can be drawn. Okay, so then we're gonna say by default, the default drawing shape is going to be a circle. So then we would say drawing shape equals circle. And also there are other ways to do this kind of constant system. If you're looking for advanced knowledge, you could investigate enum. And enum is basically a way to make like a data type that stores constants, and then like basically instances of that data type can only be the values that are listed as constants. So it's a nice way to basically make it impossible for someone to like pass you an invalid string, because technically the way we did this, like drawing shape could end up getting set to like any random string. And if we don't do anything to prevent it, users could pass us invalid strings and then be surprised that it doesn't work, right? So anyway, you can look into enums. But I think for now, this is good enough to at least make it pretty clear to the user of this class, like these are the valid shapes that you can draw. And in a later, in another unit, you're gonna learn about how to throw errors. And so potentially you could add some error code even to throw an error to the user saying that they've passed you an invalid shape if they try to set it to some other shape. So that would be another approach. All right, so let's keep it simple here for now. We're just gonna say default drawing shape is a circle, and then they can pass us circle or square, and that will determine what actually gets drawn when the user clicks and when the user drags. I mean, technically you could even have different shapes. You could have like the click shape and the drag shape. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that actually. Click shape, it's not actually that hard to add that extra feature. So let's go ahead and do it. Click shape and drag shape. They have the same constants, but you could technically have the click shape be a circle and the drag shape, let's actually make the drag shape a square by default. Okay, so just do that for all these. And if we wanted, we could actually make a constructor that took the click shape or drag shape, but I think I'm gonna leave it alone for now. Okay, so if we do add instance variables like this, then you're also gonna want to add getters and setters so that the user can actually change these, right? So let's go down here and add a getter and setter. So here's for the setter, I'm gonna say public void set drag shape, and it's gonna take a string, which should be one of those constants. In fact, I mean, a simple way to handle, if you want to protect them from passing you random things, you could actually just add an if statement that only sets it if they pass you something valid. That would be a nice simple way to protect it. And I think that would be a good example of why if we make these private, then we can protect them from being invalid values by simply adding in the setter here. If the shape doesn't equal circle, let's see, actually if it equals circle or equal square, then it is valid, right? And then we could set it. So drag shape equals shape, and then it's only going to set it if it's one of these two valid values, right? Later, when you learn about how to throw errors, you could add like an else, throw an error, right? But for now, we're just going to like ignore it if they pass us something invalid. Okay, and then basically same thing for actually, so you see how like I have the same check code for each of these? I think it'd be nice if just we had a private message method down here that just told us whether this was valid or not, because as we add more shapes to the valid shapes, we don't want to have to update both of these every time. We could just make a private Boolean is valid shape, and it just takes the string and literally just like returns whether or not it's a circle or square for now. And then if we add more shapes, we can say if it's a circle or a square or, whatever the next shape is, right? Okay, so that way in here, we can literally just like say if is valid shape, then we set the drag shape to shape. Okay, and then same thing here. If is valid shape, then we set the shape to shape. Okay, and then we need to do this once for drag shape and then once for click shape. Okay, so what it was complaining about there was that we had two methods that were exactly the same. Okay, so this is a nice way to just like make it so you only have to do the error checking once, and then it's taken care of. All right, so there's our setters. And then we could actually decide whether we wanted to have a getter or not. I think in this case, there's certainly no harm in having a getter, and it could be useful potentially. So I think we're gonna add a getter for this as well, because then they might be able to write code that like changes which drag shape or click shape it is based on what it currently is, right? So we certainly don't want to like, there's no reason to not let them see what the drag shape is. So it makes sense to have a getter. But if you notice what I'm thinking, the process I'm going through there though, is that whenever you make instance variables, you always want to consider like, should there be a getter? Should there be a setter? And if it's really not the kind of thing that the user would use, then maybe you don't have a getter for it, right? And maybe not even a setter if it's just only used internally. All right, so we're gonna make a public string get drag shape, and that's just gonna return the drag shape. And then same thing down here for click shape, get click shape. That's gonna return click shape. Okay, so now all we have to do is actually do something different when these values have different values. So down here in the response, we're going to if, so we're going to have an if statement here. So when we drag, if the drag shape equals circle. Oh, you know what? This also brings up another thing. I'm about to draw this circle and I'm like, wait a minute, how big is this circle? Why don't we have private double size? And this is gonna be, yeah, let's just do like, yeah, let's just do size. You would have to think about how you'd want this to affect different shapes. But I think if you just have one size variable, that would be good in this case, because like size could mean the diameter for circle and the side length for square. Okay, and I'm just gonna keep it simple here so I don't get too many different parameters, too many different variables, because we don't need a whole lot of them, but let's just, I think it would be good to have that. Okay, so then let's do a getter and a setter for the size. Let's do You know what? Actually, let's see. You know what? I want to keep this video short. I'm actually, this doesn't serve any purpose in like in terms of like teaching you something new. So I think I'm gonna let you decide if you want to implement something like this. You can implement a size system. But I think I'm just gonna hard code it for now because I don't want this video to get all too detailed into these side things. Okay, so if it's a circle, I'm just gonna draw a circle, right? In fact, let's just do fill circle. Okay, so if it's a circle, we set position, and then we fill circle, and I'm just gonna always make it 20. Okay, and then if it's a else, and actually the way that I set this up, like I could literally say else, because it's guaranteed to be a circle or a square because they literally can't set it to anything else. But if you had a bunch of shapes, you might have a series of else ifs. I'm gonna go ahead and just use else here. So if it's not a circle, then we're going to fill rect, and I'll make it 20 by 20. Actually, just to be clear, wait a minute. If we want these to be the same size, let's make this radius 10 so that the diameter will be 20, right? Okay. And then essentially, I'm gonna just do this exact same thing in the click, right? So except that it's gonna care what the click shape is instead of the drag shape. Okay. And all right, so there we go. We've initialized in the constructor click shape and drag shape, and we have setters so we could change them potentially. And so then this is where our keyboard events come in. Actually, so before we do that though, let's just go ahead and test this. All right, so if we run this tester, if I click, it should draw a circle, good. Notice again, it's not drawing it where I clicked because that's a problem for you to solve. And then if I drag, it draws squares. Okay, good enough so far. So now we're gonna add some keyboard listeners that change which shape it's gonna do, right? So going back in here, well, actually going back over here. So in JPanel, it inherits from component this key listener right here, add key listener. And so if I were to click on that, then you can see this takes a key listener. So just like before when I wanted my drawing tool to be a mouse listener or a mouse motion listener, I can also make it a key listener, right? So another interface. So up here, I can add this to the list. I can say, comma, key listener. And again, import java.awt.event.keyListener. Okay, that same package. Okay, and then now it's going to complain that I didn't implement these methods. So here's the methods that I need to implement. So down here, just like I did for the mouse events, I'm going to add key listener methods. Okay, and public key pressed. So notice this is going to happen when the key is pressed, but before it's been released, right? And then key released will happen when you lift the key, right? Like when you lift your finger off the key. and it's released. And then key typed is, I believe that's essentially like it's going to happen at the same time when, oh, actually, this is a little bit different. So you know how like when you, here's my theory is that key typed is going to get called when, even if you hold a key down, because it's going to get called every time you essentially like type a key, right? So think about like if I'm holding down the K key, it keeps typing key. So then it'll keep calling the key typed method, right? So because the system itself, your like Windows or Mac system is going to keep sending key events when you hold the key down, right? Okay, and so actually I think this might get called at the same time that key pressed gets called. That's my theory. Okay, you could find that out by either testing it or literally just like go here and see what does the API say. So that'd probably be the best place to start. When a key has been typed, oh, and it says go to key event for a definition of what does it mean for a key to be typed. Okay, let's just go there and see. So key event, first we have to import this. So let's go ahead and do that. Actually, I'm gonna copy this one because it's the whole thing. Okay, so way up at the top here, need to import all that. And then if we went down here and like started reading all of this, this is like gonna explain all about the events. Like I highly recommend that when you're investigating new classes, like read this top part because there's a lot of good information in here. So this actually says right here, key typed events are higher level and generally do not depend on the platform or keyboard layout. They are generated when a Unicode character is entered. Their preferred way to find out about character input. Okay, interesting. All right, so there we go. That actually may be the one that we want to use then in that case. Yeah, so this actually is nice because it handles things like if you hold down Shift and press A, you'll be able to find out that it was a capital A, for example. Okay, anyway, this is getting too detailed for the video, but you should investigate this as you're making your program. All right, so let's go down here and just really simple. I'm just gonna say, I'm actually just gonna like simply do key released because key released is a good one for like guaranteeing that something only happens once and isn't accidentally repeated if they're holding the key down. And in this case, all I'm doing is responding to if they press, okay, so if they, you know what? Yeah, so if they press and release C, then set the mouse clicked shape to a circle. And if they press and release, see, actually, wait, let's do this. Let's do, okay. I don't want to make this too complicated, but let's just say, because first we need to know which shape we're going to change. Which are we going to do? Change drag or click? Let's make, I'm just going to pick randomly. So like, let's just say if they press L, and you know what? I changed my mind. I'm just going to like literally make it the key pressed and keep it simple here. So if they pressed L, then the next key, sorry, then let's say they press L, then it is in click mode. If they press D, then it is in drag mode. And what this means is that other things they press are going to change the circle of the mode, the shape of the mode they're in. So then if they press C, then we're going to set the shape of current mode to circle. And if they press S, then set the shape of current mode to square. Okay, and now this actually brings up something. Now we need to keep track of like which mode are we in, right? And this is actually a perfect example of a private, like internal variable that isn't going to be something the user really needs to know about, right? This is like kind of none of their business, right? So we're going to make a private, could be like a string or int or something. But I think, let's see. Yeah, let's do this. Okay. Because we might have other events. So to make it a little more flexible for other events, I'm going to make a private int, which is like the mode. And then I'm going to make, again, this would be like a perfect time for enums, but let's make some final variables up here. So like public static, actually, this is going to be private static because this is none of their business. So even though, I mean, we don't even need to make it static because like, we don't really need them to know about this. So let's just say private final int drag mode is going to be 0. And then we'll say click mode is 1, right? So this opens up the door to like, if there was like, if we wanted to have like move mode, then we could add like another one like move mode. And that's 2, right? So we could make a series of like, basically just like constants that represent which mode we're in, but it'll make the code more readable than if we just used 0 everywhere or 1 everywhere, right? If we write drag mode, that's like easy to read. Okay, so these are private because the user doesn't even know there are modes, right? Like internally we have this mode system, but user doesn't even know about it. So there's not going to be any getters or setters for these. They're just private instance variables. Okay. I mean, if we wanted to, we could make them protected so that other subclasses could read them later. And that might be a good choice, but for now, I'm gonna keep it simple. They're just private. Okay, so down here, when we press keys, ultimately, we need to figure out like which key was pressed, right? So, oh, and actually, wait, up here, sorry, one more thing. What we do need to do is initialize them. So, actually, one kind of nice thing that you can do sometimes, if you have something that's going to be initialized like the same for all your constructors, you can just initialize it up here. If you do that, we initialize it to click mode. then this is gonna be the same as if we'd written at the beginning of every constructor mode equals click mode, right? Like that's when it actually happens. So if you want, it would be equivalent to doing all this, right? So sometimes that can come in handy when you're not gonna, you're gonna you have a bunch of constructors and you're initializing them all to the same thing. Oh, whoops, I messed up. So you could do it that way, or again, you could do it the way that we've been doing it like this. Okay, so we initialized mode. Okay, so then down here, before we even get into this logic, we're gonna have to like figure out how do we tell which key got pressed. So we probably wanna read over here, and it's gonna tell us. So notice right here, this says, so this says, virtual key codes are used to report which keyboard key has been pressed rather than a character generated by a combination of one or more keystrokes, such as A, which comes from Shift and A. So for example, pressing the Shift key will cause a key pressed event that is like VK Shift. And then while pressing the A, it will result in VKA. After the key is released, a key release event will be fired with VKA. Separately, a key typed event will have a key care value of capital A, right? So notice that's the difference between like key typed and key pressed and key released. So that was a good little description of how this works. So it looks like we need to use these like VK things. So since I'm just interested in like single characters like C and S and D and L, I'm just gonna use the VK constants. And they're pretty predictable, right? Like VK0 is 0, VK1 is 1, and so forth, right? So it's pretty straightforward. So I think I'm gonna say, I think I have enough in here now to know if I can find out what key was pressed, how to interpret it. So then let's go down here. So this says, oh, interesting. Actually, this says get key care. This is going to return a care representing the event. So if we say get key care, if you had Shift and A, oh, actually this might be what we want right here. Okay, that's cool. There's also some other ways to find out. So if you go down further, you'll also see you can get like key code. And I believe the key codes are the ones where you would then associate it with like the VK. So this would be really useful for keys that don't really, they're not really representing characters, right? Like the left arrow and right arrow are not really like characters that so you couldn't really say like, oh, get the care for left arrow. Like it wouldn't make any sense. So this is probably like, if you wanted to just know like one way to find out which key was pressed, this would probably be the way to go. So let's go ahead and do it this way. So first, to experiment with how this works, we could say system.out.println. I want to know the e.get key code. And then let's say this is the key code. Code equals this. And then also let's do that get key care also, because we can find out, like get a feeling for like how that works. Char equals e dot get key char. Okay. And then just as an additional check here to confirm that the get key code works the way I think it works, we can say if e dot get key code equal, like let's say vk, oh wait, so just to be clear, these are constants in the key event, right? So if you, let's look back at the API, and so just so you understand, all of these like vk, wow, this scrolls a lot. We gotta scroll all the way up here. Okay, so all of these, notice they're all static. So to access these, you have to say the name of the class, right? Key event, and then dot the constant, right? So like if we wanted to see if it was a C, then surprise, it's VKC, right? It's not really a surprise. So VK underscore C. So if it's a C, then let's just say system.out.println C was pressed. Okay, so that way we can print out some info, and then we figure out that it works the way we think it works. Okay, and this will also be a good starting point for key responses, because really the first thing we want to know is that, like, is it actually working, right? Like, are we actually getting key responses? Because so we start out with just like printing something, right? So don't try anything like super complicated with, don't try any like super complicated logic first, because that's just gonna make you unsure whether your logic isn't working or whether this keyboard system isn't working. And I'm gonna save you a little bit of time in that there is a little trick with keyboard events, which is that if you go back here to okay, if you go back here to the component class here, one of the things is that when you type stuff, it matters which part of the window, like which thing in the UI is selected. So obviously, like if I'm clicking here in the web, if I'm clicking here in the BlueJ editor and I type code, like it gets key responses in the editor. But if I click, like if I click up on like the top of the window and I type things, like nothing's showing up, right? Because like I'm not on that, I'm not in the editor, right? So basically, there's always some component that has focus. It's called focus, right? And that's the one that's going to receive keyboard events. So if we go down here to, okay, if we were to just do like a search for focus, there's a lot, but what we want to know is like, we want to be able to, in fact, maybe let's just like, well, yeah, we need to just like look for like, how do we change focus? So I'm seeing a bunch of these focuses here. Got focus. What I would like is a way to get the focus. And it might actually be, it might be in component, or it might be in container or something else. If you look around, here we go. Okay. So if you click on, so there's a series of ones here that say you can request focus, but there's a bunch of them here. So we might look into like, if you look into like how it works, I believe if you click on request focus, it's gonna tell you that what you should do is, do you see how it says like, note the use of this method is discouraged because its behavior is platform dependent. Instead, we recommend request focus in window, right? So again, this request, it decides, it requests that it be in focus, right? So that it will get input from the keyboard. But it's saying we should use request focus in window instead, and then it refers you to some more you could read about. But I think that's enough for us to know that we need to use request focus in window. All right, so then way back up here at the top, that means there's a couple of things we need to do here. So first, we added key listener as one of the interfaces we implement, but we didn't do this kind of thing where we actually like said we wanted to add it as a listener. So let's do that first. Git pad panel dot add key. That was it, key listener. I think it was add key listener. Okay, if we weren't sure, wait, oh, pad panel. Okay, if we weren't sure, we could go back and find it in the API again, but it looks like I guessed right. Add key listener, this, and then we also need to do this request focus in window. So we can say git pad panel dot request focus in window. Okay, so it's saying at the very beginning when we create a pin, we're gonna request that the pad panel receive key events. Okay, so I'm gonna do that in all of these constructors. So we're gonna add ourselves as a listener, and then we're gonna say, I wanna actually get key events in that pad panel. Okay, so now we could go test it. So let's go back to here. We say DrawingTool tester, and let's bring up the terminal so we can see. Okay, and if we do F, aha, there we go. F was code 70 and it was char F. So it looks like you could definitely like check for the char, like if it equal, like in single quotes F. And then if you look here, our VKC, the system worked as well though, right? C was pressed because I just pressed C. All right, that's all I really need to know. So we can go back here and now we're in business, right? So now that you kind of know how it works, you could uncomment that if you wanted, or leave it however you want. I do think I'd like to uncomment all of these mouse event things though, because these print messages are spamming and it's out of control. All right. Okay. So now instead of just typing C was pressed, let's actually do what it says. So now we need to know like if the mode is, what was it that we had here? So at the top we had drag mode and click mode. That's right. Okay, so if mode is drag mode, then we're going to set drag shape to a circle. Otherwise, and for now we just have two modes. So let's assume that it's either in drag mode or click mode. So we'll say else set click shape to circle. Okay, and then basically we just do this same kind of logic again. For if the e.keycode is event.vks, then we either set it to a square for drag or a square for click. And then let's just do else if e dot get key code is key event dot vkl, then we're going to set it to click mode, right? So then mode equals click mode. And then else if it is VKD, then set it to drag mode. All right. So all right, so now if we were to test this out, let's see if this does what we wanted it to do. So we run this. By default, if I click, it's going to be a square. If I say L, it's now in click mode. If I say C, if I type C, it's now should be circle. So now if I click, yay, now it's drawing circles. Okay, and then if I say D, if I click D, now it's in, or sorry, type D, it's now in drag mode. And then right now, I believe drag mode is circles. So if I say S, now drag mode is squares. Yay, it's all working. So I think this is going to be the end of this video. And I'm looking forward to you guys doing some really cool creative things in your programs. Hope this was helpful, and goodbye.